Afternoon. What is a very rainy afternoon for us here in Leeds. Thanks so much for signing up to our event. We will be starting in a couple of minutes. We just like to make sure that we let everyone get in, get themselves comfortable, get your cups of tea, get cozy for the next hour. We've got a really good show coming up. As usual, got some familiar names and faces coming in, so always appreciate our ongoing support and also some new names as well. We've got the webinar chat. Feel free. David already has. You've only sent that to me, David. The hello everyone. You need to send it to everyone. Please feel free, everyone, all delegates and panelists, to use that webinar chat to say hello, anything that you would like to comment, any conversations that you'd like to have. More than happy for everyone to be using that function and saying hello. We'll start in maybe another minute or so. That's better. Now everyone can see. Thanks. Right, it's a couple of minutes past. We've got quite a few people in attendance now, so we'll make a start. Thank you everyone for coming to our Building Back Greener Strategies for Building, Transforming and Retrofitting the NHS Estate webinar. This is a webinar that we run every year with sustainability partnerships. It's super important. It's always been super high on everyone's agenda on all of the green plans, so it's something that's absolutely steadfast. And B, it is World Green Building Week in September. So this is why we always run this event in September. We've got some brand new faces on the panel, some brand new partners for us to be showcasing to you guys. So I'm really, really excited that we first are going to welcome David Coxon. He will introduce himself and he's going to be speaking to you first. He is from Newcastle NHS Foundation Trust. So a really big trust with loads of stuff going on. David has a super interesting background as well, so we'll look forward to him introducing himself. We're then going to move on to Ian. Ian is also a brand new partner for us at Sustainability Partnerships. He is coming to us from a company called Next Gen, and he's going to talk to us about the next generation of heating. And then we are going to finish with Alison. She's going to introduce herself, but she's from Natural Capital Solutions. So what I'm going to do is pass over to David. If everyone does have any questions, they will be kept to the end after we've heard from all three of our speakers. If you can put any questions into the Q&A function, I'll be able to pose them to the panelists afterwards. If you have anything else that you'd like to say, if you'd like to comment, if you'd like to share where you're coming from today, any contact details, use that webinar chat function. So we'll kick off with you, David. A little bit interesting. You and I had conversations earlier in the month about your background, some questions that you have, some perspectives that you have. So do you want to give us a bit of a run through of your background and what you'd like to discuss with us today?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the intro, Georgia. So my name's David. I work for the NHS Foundation Trust in Newcastle upon Tyne. So I look after two really big hospitals and a number of smaller community sites. I joined the trust in December and I came from a background working in the arts. So I previously managed a little bit of the energy for an art gallery in Newcastle, or in Gateshead, I should say, called Baldock. As my role there, my primary job was head of IT. So I look after their servers, their worktops, their printers, a lot of their data. But over the period since COVID, I did quite a lot of work intensively with sustainability and turning off as much as we could when the gallery was closed to get through COVID with as much money left in the bank as we possibly could. So that we're still open afterwards. And also because we were working towards a green initiative across the whole of the UK generally. So that's where my immediate background came from. before that, I had a background in design and communications, and I studied business and finance at college. But my family business from when I was really small was heating and ventilating. So my dad dragged me around all sorts of plant rooms. I was used to wearing hard hats and following flow and return. So although I'm fairly new to energy, I'm also have 50 years or so experience in related areas. The things that struck me most when I joined the NHS were just the scale of the whole problem. So I went from managing a single building that was about 11 stories, but quite a small single building footprint, to an entirely different thing. So the trust that I work in now, both hospitals have CHP plants, so we're generating electricity and burning gas which produces heat, which we then use to heat the hospital. But we're also working with steam, and we're working with buildings that are, up to 100 years old. So the ducts underneath those buildings are very old, and they were designed for steam, which is a very different size to the modern kind of hot water systems you might get for heat pumps and things like that. So retrofitting some of those buildings are quite complicated. But on the other side of that, we also have the new builds. So health requirements are changing. The types of people that we see coming into our hospitals are changing over time as we have a different populations and an aging population and things like that. And there's a dynamic across the number of people in the region. So we're rapidly increasing in size compared to some of the other regions that are more static because they've had very big populations for a long time. There's less room for increases. So we're both building and retrofitting, and part of the NHS guidelines are very good about looking at what you exactly already have and working out whole life carbon footprints to see whether or not it's better to retrofit or to knock a building down to the foundations and build from scratch. And looking at things like where the windows are, where the lighting is. It's quite different working in a trust. So things that I didn't experience working in the arts are things like, theatres deliberately don't have any light because you don't want surgeries being interrupted by the sunlight glaring in through windows and things like that. It needs to be much more controlled. And there are a whole extra level. So on top of the normal building regulations, there are a whole load of technical memorandums that we have to abide by as well that control things like the number of airflows that go through a theatre or an operating room or a waiting room are all very different. So a lot of the things to make the whole NHS much more sustainable are kind of asking questions about those things to say, really, does the air changes need to happen through the night when there's nobody working in that theatre, or can we not put things in place where we put motion sensors in the theatre to say if there's nobody in that theatre, if there's no movement, if there's no microwave detection, can we reduce the airflow to an amount where we're not dealing with microbes and making sure there's no infection. We're dealing with making sure there's the air's more breathable and more pleasant should a cleaner go in there at 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that. It's those different levels and looking at, we obviously can't compromise on lots of things. So health will and safety will always trump everything else, but it's looking at all of those other things. So we put in lots and lots of very strict rules to make sure that everything's very, very safe. But also we have to say saving the planet's also a very big concern. And is there a trade-off we can come to where we're saving the planet, but in a way that's safe to you, our staff and patients and all the other people that use our hospital buildings? So that's some of the areas that I'm interested in. I asked some questions prior to this meeting about sort of what our big concerns were, and they were things like the challenges that I have on only trying to meet net zero by 2030. Our trust kind of chose to bring that deadline forward because we felt it was very important. It's also looking at the finances, so looking at what money we're allowed to spend. So at the moment, we have a situation where we can't take investment from outside sources like PFIs because of the problems that's led to in the past. We can't use our own money the way we want to, because that money has to go to backlog maintenance first, and it controls the amount of money we can spend on green initiatives versus the amount on actual patient care and treatments. And then there's the only real revenue sources that are left are things like PPAs, but they're currently blocked by Treasury rules. So that's power pricing agreements, so agreeing to buy power at a certain price from, say, an off-grid solar farm or a geothermal site, all of which are very promising technologies. And for me, the problem's not so much with not having access to technology, it's not being able to invest in that technology in the way that we need to invest in it. So it essentially only leaves one route, which is public sector decarbonisation funding, but competition for that amount of money is very tight. And because it's a process of having to go through an application. There's quite a lot of uncertainty, so you never know whether you're going to get funding or not. For example, the block of funding in now, we'll find out in October whether we'll find out in May whether we've been successful, by which time we'll already have passed this year's deadline for spending anything on this year's capital spend. So it leaves us in a position where that uncertainty makes it very hard for us to make considered decisions about what we want to try and fund through different channels. So what we go to charities and ask for funding for, what we go to government and ask for funding for, and what we try and fund through our own revenue streams. And that uncertainty is really the thing that's difficult to deal with, because we have to almost back lots and lots of horses, hoping that one of them will get over the line before everybody else. There's also competition, so we have to put in a bid in competition to all of the other really great hospital trusts across the country that equally need the money just as much. So it's trying to come up with a solution where we can all get to the position we need to be in by 2040, which is the national deadline for the NHS, and how we can work collaboratively to not so much fight for the funding that's available, but to fight to allow government to allow funding through channels which will allow us all to achieve what we need to achieve in the time that we need to achieve it. Does that all sound?
Thanks, Jane.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that hopefully there should be a lot, well, not hopefully, but I'm assuming there will be a lot of people on here who are feeling the same pain and have done for a long time. I guess it takes someone like you to have come from a different sector to come in and sort of really question why are these the frameworks? Why do we have to be in competition with each other? How can we work maybe a little bit more collaboratively to work together in just kind of question the validity of the situation whereby you're having to put so much of your energy and time into backing all those different horses, where potentially, a more streamlined approach might be more relevant for you. And I think that I know that you've sort of come to it with just kind of a open question kind of situation, sort of open arms. I'm this is my situation. I'm sure lots of other people are in it. Who has any suggestions on the way to collaborate? Who does have it? I know that you've not sort of come with any kind of other agenda around you having any kind of answer other than just navigating it through things. And I really want to open up the webinar chat here as well for anyone who's in the same situation as David, anyone who does have any other we've got sustainability partnerships, we've got this network, and we love for people to use this network and use our platform to be able to collaborate with each other in a way that you might not necessarily have access to due to the siloed nature of how the trusts are built. But if there are any other ways for people to communicate and collaborate, if there are any other platforms or resources, please be sharing as much as possible. A lot of people are chatting and sharing links and stuff, so please continue to do so. Great supporter of us on the call today here is Pete Waddingham. I would extend anyone he's put his LinkedIn on there to get in touch with him, because he is a power to be reckoned with. So and we've also got Karina as well, has offered up some her LinkedIn account as well. Anyone who has any information, anything to share, please do share that on here. Now we talked about that funding that you said we don't find out until May. That's just opened. The information about that Salix funding has just opened this week, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I often wonder, Salix or Salix, people do it differently, right? I go for Salix. Please correct me if I'm wrong, anyone else on the call. So what I'm going to do is sort of leave that there, leave that open, sort of say, David is here for any collaboration, any conversation, in especially around things like funding and how to collaborate further. But I'm going to introduce Ian because one of the main facets on that Salix funding document is around heating. Now, David talked about the aging estate of what he's dealing with up in Newcastle, and that retrofit versus brand new is something that he has to sort of contend with quite often. And I know that we talk about the RVI being sort of, it's a Victorian building, right, David? And I think a lot of the estate around the country is of that era. Ian, you've been working on something brand new, innovative, and potentially not stress-free. I'm going to upsell it for you. Potentially a lot less stressful in terms of retrofit. Why don't you come on and tell us who you are and what you guys have been working on?
Yeah, you can tell from my age and my grey hair how stress-free this environment is. Afternoon, everybody. Ian Sanderson, just a very, very short intro. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur, was investing heavily in America in material science companies for about a decade. And then just before COVID, basically came back to the UK looking for kind of green tech stroke clean tech investments, but particularly with a social impact orientation. So we've actually acquired a company called NextGen. We bought it in February 2023. I'm going to make the general assumption that everybody on the call knows what a conventional radiator looks like. That big thing on the wall, you've lived with them all the time. You probably don't even see them now because they've been such a kind of key part of your existence. But you'll understand in principle that most of the heating technologies in the market still effectively use a relatively small emitter of heat into a large space, and they move air. I'm going to show you a next generation radiator. I'm guessing that most of you haven't seen a radiator that looks like wallpaper before, but that is the next gen radiator itself. And we simply send, you can just about see a pink strip. You should be able to see a gray area and another pink strip. We send electricity through that gray area, low voltage, 24 volts to 36 volts. And what comes out of that is basically not a transfer from electricity to pure heat, but a transfer to basically emit infrared in exactly the same wavelength as sunlight warms you up as a human being. So effectively take the analogy of you're standing in the sunshine, you're feeling the warmth on your body. That's what we've replicated. And over and above that, if you're standing in the sunshine, or maybe you're sitting on a wall, for example, and you put your hand on the wall and the wall's warm, the next gen system does exactly that, heat you, but it also starts to store energy in the fabric around you. And to come back to George's point about new build or retrofit, one of the things I liked about this technology is it's really agnostic to new or to old. We're not effectively impacted by air changes in the way that a conventional system that's putting heat purely into air is affected. And I'll kind of try and illustrate that. I've got a couple of slides that will illustrate that. But just to kind of show you the output, I'm actually, I don't know how you guys are doing in terms of being warm, but I'm pretty toasty in here because I've got the actual system turned on above me. But we're in our boardroom. You can see a ceiling there on the screen that literally looks like a conventional white ceiling. You can see lights through the ceiling. You can see sensors in the ceiling. This is a standard infrared camera, and you can see the panel structures in the ceiling above me. So those panels are emitting infrared. About 80% of all of the energy that comes out of them is infrared. And it's basically warming me up, but it's warming everything around me up. So one of the unique features of this system is it instantly warms you. So that whole process of trying to heat air and effectively getting to a target temperature and maybe taking half an hour to an hour to do that, that goes away immediately. When you turn the system on, within 2 minutes, you're starting to feel the emitted warmth. Within 10 minutes, particularly in houses, care homes, we've been able to record data that shows you get to comfort warmth within about 10 minutes. But what that drives you to be able to do is to heat people in spaces, but based on presence. And the key kind of feature here is that a lot of the organizations we're working with just never focus on waste and on wastage. And a lot of the technologies that you're looking at, heat pumps, for example, ground source heat, they don't really give you the agility to heat people in spaces. They basically expect you to just deliver energy almost as a constant into spaces because they fundamentally have a low base energy source to effectively heat the air in the first place. So, I'm basically going to quickly change to some slides. I've put a few questions in first, just to kind of set the scene more than anything in terms of how I perceive the situation. So hopefully this is going to come up. So just very quickly in terms of our current market, NextGen, since we bought it a year ago, we've got over 60 live projects. In fact, it's more than that now. We've actually got 60 live projects in social housing with social housing groups across the UK. We're fitting thousands of homes with this next generation heating technology and primarily focusing on hard to heat homes. And that kind of spins across then into your challenge of your portfolio being some of it aged all the way through to your new build. You can see a range of different application environments there. The care home environment was our first exposure to healthcare. And we've had some really interesting dynamic responses from the care home environment. One in particular around the way that the patients respond to it and general health benefits of actually being heated in an environment that's controlled by infrared. Particularly around respiratory issues, particularly around oxygenization of blood. So there's a kind of whole thesis on the medical benefits of it. But what the care homes have benefited from is absolute control of who is where within the building and when they need to heat them. So to give you an example, the patients in some of the care home projects we're in are Bluetooth tagged. And if they leave their room and go to a communal area, the system actually knows they've left their room and will stop heating their room until they leave the communal area to come back to their room, and it'll turn back on again. That's actually automated within the process, but the people running the care home can now change every heating parameter in the whole building. That's 130 rooms in one of them with about 16 different communal areas. So that kind of agility goes alongside the thermal efficiency we've got. So in terms of the questions that I wanted to basically raise to you, just to kind of open your minds to the whole situation, I'm assuming it's pretty fair to say that historically you've heated on a kind of one-dimensional basis. Pretty much every hospital, I've been not too many hospitals in my life, but pretty much everywhere I've had the experience of being in hospital, you are predominantly heating and moving air. And the principle of convection, you're not just moving air, you're moving everything else that air can carry. So dust and germs and everything else. And it's kind of intrigued me, that kind of whole issue of control of the quality of air. I kind of feel that should be part of your agenda. But if you take point two, this kind of standardization, I've checked with several different hospital trusts that we're working with just to check this piece of data because it came up on the internet. But it was this standardization of ward temperatures being 23 to 25 degrees. Having experienced that, it's quite unpleasant if you don't want to be hot. It's probably a requirement if you feel cold and you want to be heated, but there's no choice across the entire estate. Imagine if you could heat people in their beds and give people a choice. One person could be heated, the person next to them could not have it on. That kind of agility will start to influence not just your costs and your economics, but it'll start to actually significantly improve the journey your patients are on. I tried to get some estimates of the size of your estate, and actually it's a bit confusing because it kind of ranged from 25 million square meters right the way through to 200 million square meters. So if anybody in the chat can actually give me a really good overall view on the size of the challenge you've got, I'll be intrigued. I found a single piece of data that said there might be in excess of 20 million square meters of estate properties with suspended ceiling tiles in. One of the products we have actually developed is a drop-in suspended ceiling tile that would just literally go straight into your existing grid for heating your spaces with ceiling tiles in. So I carried on with my questions and I started looking at the one-dimensional approach, and this comes back really to the point that David raised earlier. Is the decarbonisation even your right question at this point? How much energy are you wasting on an annualized basis? Is anybody really studying that? Is anybody really looking at the core? I was with an NHS trust on Tuesday and we walked around. They showed me some consulting rooms. There was probably 30 of them in a single area. And effectively, she had the roster of when they were being used. Every one of them was being heated 24 hours a day. Some of them were only being used once or twice a week. And, that kind of fundamental is where we change the game in terms of being able to, literally, as David said earlier, have a sensor. Somebody walks in, it turns on, you're immediately warm, you leave the room, it turns off. That, to me, is the future in terms of the control that you can be given. Will new technologies that you're already looking at, particularly the move to ground source, air source heat pumps, will it actually reduce your energy bills and reduce your waste when you kind of assess that against your fossil fuel costs? I mean, gas is significantly cheaper than electricity at the moment. How big a part will renewables play in your process? And energy storage will be absolutely critical if you're going to really accelerate the value of renewable. So it was kind of just trying to put all of these things on the table in terms of how you're looking at it. And then the patient. I bought this company specifically because I thought this technology could help people, and not just in houses. I mean, we're setting up a foundation alongside NextGen to focus on effectively fuel poverty. But I'm seeing a situation where we're doing projects in schools that are definitively changing the experience of being in a school for children, and changing that kind of fundamental economic around heating large spaces in education. I think that we can significantly change the relationship between you and your patient. Not just in terms of warmth, choosing how warm you are in your situation within a hospital, but also radically improving the air that your patients actually breathe by stopping using convection and stopping moving en masse air around every environment that you're basically providing heat into. And then you've got the staff. The other big thing that came out of the care home programs is the staff working in highly charged environments with convection-based air at 23 to 25 degrees. That intensity that they're exposed to in terms of heat and kind of humidity and working in that environment is not good for their health and well-being. And actually, if you look at the new health and well-being legislation, it's actually not going to correspond with the legislation for actually how people are working within the workspace itself. So it's something the NHS will have to address as you go forward. I'm going to basically jump to the slides and then kind of come back to this, because in essence, we'll have kind of gone through an education and then we'll come back to the last set of questions. But I just want to quickly cover off what we mean by convection and what we mean by effectively delivering energy within the format of infrared. So here's a standard room with a radiator in it. We've all lived that way. A very hot spot. Effectively, air rises. It's not heat that rises. The radiator's changing the molecular structure of the air. It rises, it effectively goes to the cold spots and it falls, and you've got that constant circulation of air. By mobilizing energy in air, you're allowing that, the basic physics of hot energy going to cold, you're basically allowing that to happen in every environment you create. And effectively, you have a lot of glass, you have a lot of windows in most of the buildings that you've got. The hot air that comes out of the radiator will effectively immediately go to the coldest point in the room. Now, we get around that because we're effectively emitting energy out across the entire space. So we have no temperature gradient across any room we're installed in. If you basically have the radiators on the ceiling, heating downwards, basically emitting uniformly across the entire room, wherever you are in the room, you will feel the benefit of that heat output. And the critical aspect of this is by using infrared, rather than specifically heating air, you're storing energy in the fabric. The energy is less mobile, and you will have, therefore, just dynamically, you have to have less thermal losses. And less thermal losses is saving you money. Less thermal losses, that kind of effect of heat the actual fabric rather than the space, that will allow you to choose these kind of technologies across old to new in terms of the age stock that you've got. This is just a graphic effectively just to give you the impression of how you could effectively look at a dynamic space within, in principle, this would be a new office or a new hospital space. So in principle here, we've got two different next-gen technologies overlapping. Across the table, if you can see the table with the computer units across the back, technically that is showing that we can put heating tiles, so the physical tile product, which I'll show you separately in a second, directly over workspaces where people are working in that environment. And then the actual panel products that are in the foreground, again, they can be suspended on the ceiling and give you absolute granular control over heating those spaces when people are in those spaces. And rather than actually measure air as the way of effectively determining comfort within that space, you actually measure the human comfort warmth. And that allows you to stop wasting energy heating space around you that effectively people are not populating. So we can do this in wide open spaces. We have the panel product, which I'll show you in a second. If I go to this slide, this panel product has been developed initially for Amazon. So Amazon have 1 million square foot open cube spaces with everything we buy from Amazon in them. And they have about 1,000 workstations in each 1 million square foot system with people working cold. And the second largest reason people leave Amazon is because they're cold during the winter. This technology is so capable, it can heat people literally within 1 million square foot space, specifically where they work. So imagine how you could leverage that within the NHS portfolio. David was talking about theatres and kind of whole surgery and surgical environment. Again, we could develop panels with all of the lighting built into it. We could put lots of different other kind of key technologies in and around the heating system, but effectively deliver energy exactly when you need it into that surgical space. And you'd absolutely know that you're not going to circulate additional air effectively in terms of that kind of control that David talked about with the systems you currently use to control air quality. This just kind of brings it back to a kind of smaller zone, but it's that combination of technologies. NextGen is perfectly suited and has been developed to be directly linked to solar, to energy storage, to the actual heating technology itself. So come back to that as your basic thesis. I'm not sitting here at all and telling you that we're a one-dimensional solution for what you need to do. I'm basically sitting here and saying NextGen is a tool in your toolbox that will give you choices that you're not currently even asking the questions on. And that to me, in all the meetings I've had with the NHS so far, the key thing that's come out of it is you're not actually yet asking the key questions about what happens when you go through this next phase. And I think it's partly because particularly government have led the strategy on how to heat buildings in the future, almost on a one-dimensional strategy around heat pumps and ground source heat and these other kind of basic technologies that in essence have been in the market for a long time, but have become the government's kind of silver bullet on the way forward. I actually think that there'll be a role for both sides of that equation, for both types of technologies. The size of the portfolio you've got, the size of the properties you've got, the complexities of the working environment you've got. I think the actual real solution will be to hybrid those technologies together. Let me go back to the questions because George or I will just keep talking all day if we don't get some control here. So I kind of looked at this in terms of, summarizing where we are as a technology and where we kind of fit in terms of what you're looking to do over the next 20, 30 years. But the question I raised initially is decarbonisation enough of a change? And I just don't see it is. I think you've got to look at it from a wastage perspective as well as a heat provision perspective. You've already talked about new buildings, knocking down old buildings, all of those key issues. Your ability to use technologies like this to give you more choice around do you knock down or not, I think is absolutely critical. You have to change the culture of your people as well around the use of energy. It's not just effectively, can I heat to a temperature, but overheating. Heating empty space is so illogical, but we've never asked that question of ourselves. We've never done it in our own homes, so why would we do it in the workplace? But the reality is now we have to do from a carbon footprint perspective and from an energy perspective. That 3D approach, we can effectively heat workspaces that specifically heat people. That open space issue, these agile and agnostic technologies will just make a huge difference in how you effectively create really bespoke solutions for each of the environments that you're looking at. So, the toolbox we've basically looked at, I've just put one question on the end, the NHS, on an annualized basis. I'd love it. Anybody on this forum has got any idea how we could just simply look at one basic question. If we reduce the ward temperature to 18 to 20 degrees and heated people in their beds rather than heated open space, how much energy saving would that create? How much CO2 saving would that create? I've put the same question to UK government about housing. We've got 28 million homes in the UK. Imagine if we stopped heating one room in every house. How big a difference would that make to grid demand? How big a difference would it make to energy usage? How big a difference would it make on the CO2 front? You can ask yourself, as estate managers of huge estates, the same question when it comes to the workspaces you've got. So, yes, that's your brief intro to NextGen.
Thanks, Ian. No, I do know that you'd be able to keep going if we just give you the rest of the hour, but I appreciate you trying to keep to time at least. And I think, there has been a lot of comments, there's been some questions come in. I am going to pose them to you after we've heard from Alison, but I really appreciate everything that you're trying to do. And hopefully, David, in the future, we will be asking the right questions. And I know that you found this yourself really interesting. So we'll come and I'll let you ask maybe Ian some questions afterwards as well. Alison, can you please introduce yourself and let us know what you're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, thanks, Georgia. Hi, everybody. I'm Alison Holt. I'm director and co-founder of Natural Capital Solutions. And Natural Capital Solutions is a leading consultancy that specialises in biodiversity and ecosystem services or natural capital research and consulting. And so generally, I work with lots of different sectors, helping organisations manage their own land or land they might have an impact on, with a view to enhancing benefits like carbon sequestration, air pollution regulation, health and wellbeing benefits, but also biodiversity. And so we've been going for about 10 years now. And before that, I was an academic at the University of Sheffield researching in these areas. But the reason I wanted to talk to you guys today is because I've relatively recently, and I'm just going to share my screen. Hang on a minute. I have to press the share screen button first. That would be good. Here we go. I've recently worked with the NHS in Scotland on a couple of projects where they were attempting to quantify and value the benefits of the NHS outdoor estate in order to ensure it was accounted for in decisions at the estate level. So what they felt was that quite a lot of the time we talk about buildings, but don't think about the green outside, other than to sometimes think about what might be built on it. And I'm sure that's not always the case, but they felt it was to some degree. And so I thought it might be useful to take you through why a business case for the NHS outdoor estate is important in the bigger scale estate and how it can be done. So NHS hospitals, care homes, GP surgeries have a varying amount of outdoor space. Some might just have a patch of grass that's mown, but some can have parkland, woodland. There's a lot of variation. And actually, in the NHS in England is on land, an area of land of about 6,500 hectares. So most of that will be built on, but some of that will be outdoor land. In Scotland, I don't have an overall value, but just in the NHS Lothian estate, 81 hectares of their estate is actually green or blue space. And so these areas are really important, whether they're large or small, but particularly the larger ones. And they're important to the NHS staff, they're important to patients, and they're important to people who live around the sites, who aren't in hospital, but may be able to access those sites. And they can be used for all sorts of activities, organised or otherwise. And for example, in a survey we did at NHS Scotland, we found that walking activities were the most popular use of NHS outdoor estates there. But also active travel to and from work, picnicking, recreational gardening, cycling, running, social gatherings and outdoor therapeutic interventions were also mentioned as popular activities. But there are likely to be many more. And the reason why these green spaces are important is because they provide a wide range of benefits to people and nature, as they are, but they can also be managed to enhance these benefits too. So on screen, you can see there's a range, so physical health and mental well-being are maybe some of the most important in the NHS context, but there's also health benefits associated with reducing air pollution. The green space also works hard retaining and taking up carbon. It can provide shady areas, so provides local climate regulation, pollination for insects, food production. Some sites have allotments on them, but the green spaces of any kind are also important for water flow and quality regulation and providing habitat for biodiversity. So these benefits are important, particularly the health and well-being ones, because they can rack up considerable cost savings to the NHS through improving recovery from illness. They provide a place for staff to de-stress. Absenteeism in the NHS is a particular problem, so working cultures and encouraging the use of outdoor space can be really beneficial. They can also help address health inequalities and improve public health by being accessible to people, particularly from deprived areas, who live in and around the hospitals, who can actually use the space themselves as well. So that's really important. So it's also important in the context we've already been talking about, which is net zero. Green and blue habitats or green infrastructure of outdoor estates can help contribute to that, because they're taking up carbon, or certain habitats will be, and you can enhance it to do so. Can also help with climate mitigation and adaptation, and also sustainability strategies. And also it's important to think of them about as part of a network of habitats, not just inside the hospital site, but how they join up with those outside to foster nature recovery, which is an important part of the Environment Act at the moment as well. So considering the value of the NHS's outdoor estate from these angles will also help with moving hospitals to not just treat acute illness, but to start thinking about disease prevention upstream for the whole community. So that's the staff, the local community, and the patients. So to achieve this and to make the most of the outdoor space, the value of the benefits of the space need to be included in decisions about the estate as a whole. And the driver behind the work in Scotland that I did was the need to ensure that this value was captured and enhanced, because quite often it was missed out of the discussions about the estate. And like I said, it was mainly focused on buildings, and when green space was considered, it was whether or not to sell it off or to build over it. And that's understandable considering some of the pressures. But to do this, a convincing business case is required that outlines the value of all the benefits that the site provides in monetary terms as far as possible. And the aim then is to conserve and enhance the benefits of the estate and move to actively managing and maintaining them for the benefits. And this can be done by conducting a baseline natural capital and biodiversity assessment and using mapping to plan future changes that can really enhance the benefits that the outdoor estate provides. So this kind of assessment can be relatively quick and inexpensive. The habitats or green and blue spaces at the sites can be mapped. You can see a map, an example on the right-hand side of the slide. which shows where the buildings are, what the different habitats are, whether they're woodland, hedges, grassland, etc. And we can also map the different benefits I showed you earlier, like carbon sequestration, health and well-being. And then the monetary value of those can be estimated. And this enables then the opportunities for enhancement of these services to be considered, and also create strategies for managing the sites long term. So I'm just going to go through the couple of slides talking about a case study of some work that I did in NHS Lothian. And this was across, well, we worked and mapped at all of their sites. Just going to give you some results of that natural capital assessment for the site scale. So as you can see, the whole estate is 174 hectares. 81 of those 81 hectares of the 174 is actually green space. That's like 46% of the estate, which is quite a surprise to me. It's made up of large sites that have a greater range of habitats than some of the smaller sites. There's woodland and parkland sites, but the smaller sites tend to be dominated by sealed surfaces and maybe a more sort of shrub planting kind of approach. And some don't have any green space at all, it's fair to say. So what we did first is have a look at the biodiversity, because in NHS Lothian they're particularly interested in this because it was one of their statutory requirements to show that they're actually enhancing biodiversity. So we used the government or DEFRA's biodiversity metric to measure the baseline level of the habitat biodiversity, and it also assesses whether or not these habitats are in good ecological condition. And what we found was that around sort of 72% of these habitats are actually in poor condition. And if these were improved to good condition, excuse me, my phone seems to be ringing. And if these were actually bumped up to a better condition, so just more actively managed, thinking about putting grassland with a bit more structure in, and maybe wildflower meadows, or putting a few more hedgerows or a few more trees in, they could actually increase the biodiversity units by about 145, which is actually quite a lot. And like I say, this was important because they needed to be seen to be furthering conservation biodiversity. And in England, it's important to fit in with nature recovery targets in sort of in different regions. And also because studies are now showing that more diversity in terms of the environment promotes better health and well-being. So we found that in terms of carbon, just to give you an idea, the estate as it was taking up 282 tonnes of carbon equivalent in a year, and over a 50-year period, that's that present value comes to 1.14 million. It was also taking up a tonne of particulate matter every year, absorbed through the hedgerows and the trees that are already there. And that could be improved upon if the green infrastructure was thought about and managed in a slightly different way. In terms of health and well-being, we looked at the value of some of the activities that were going on the site. So we ran a cost-benefit analysis on some of the health and well-being benefits around gardening, 2 gardening activities related to the green space, and found that the gardening included about 350 people every year and provided a value of 4.65 million over 50 years. So in cost-benefit terms, the money that was spent, so for every £1 spent on those activities, they were getting £2 in return in benefits, which is actually a really good return. And looking at another conservation activity, so people going out doing conservation activities in some of the hospital grounds, and just looking at one individual, we found that a cost saving of £3,780 approximately annually could be made just from one person doing that activity outside, avoiding prescription costs, psychiatric costs, and nurse and support worker costs. So it just shows that having that outdoor space and it being used in that way is actually has a massive value to the NHS. Taken together, all of these benefits came to 500,700 annually, which is 14.14 million over 50 years. So that's not even considering all the other benefits like the water quality, flood alleviation, and climate benefits that this outdoor estate could be providing. And so we were mapping at each of the hospital sites and the care home sites as well to get a picture of what was going on. And it's possible to do this at any site. You can create maps of habitats, condition, biodiversity units, and various different benefits like carbon and air pollution regulation. And so we're able to get the value of those different services, but we're also able to map where the hospital or other health site lay in relation to all the habitats around it. So you could think about any improvements to that outdoor estate and how it connects up with other habitats for biodiversity. And from this, we were able to make recommendations about how to enhance these benefits at each site, which trees to plant where, which other habitats to manage and improve, where seating and signage could go, how to encourage staff to use different places at break times, how to ensure there was green space provision in new buildings that were being planned, and how to extend the outdoor therapeutic activities. And NHS Lothian used this assessment as an evidence base to make a convincing business case for managing the green spaces in a different way. And we produced a mapping tool that they could use to manage the estate sites. They could remove and add sites, improve habitats, so they could recalculate the level of these benefits and the value that was being provided, and use it to test future scenarios. So they could think, well, what happens if we manage this site in a different way, or we lose this site and gain this? They would have a picture of what would be happening to those benefits and whether they'd be going up or down. And just lastly, also worked for Public Health Scotland and Nature Scot, which was particularly looking at the whole of the NHS Scotland outdoor estate and how best we can value the health and wellbeing benefits from there. And I think thought it might be useful to relay some of the key recommendations to you. So we can use existing metrics to value some of the health and wellbeing benefits that come from these hospital sites. But for the most part, new approaches will be required. But if anyone's interested in doing that, the HM Treasury Green Book is a good place to start. But also I'll put a link to our report in the chat, and you can see the kind of approaches that we're suggesting would be really useful. But the key thing is to gather data about the green space. So that's using a natural capital or biodiversity assessment, but also understand how people are using it. So understand or do surveys of patients and staff and local people and see how they're using the space, and then can then understand how that might be built upon and improved. One thing that came out as well was to think about zoning the estate for staff, patients and visitors for green parking. So and community activities. So thinking about walking areas, cycle paths, gardening areas for therapeutic purposes, playgrounds or arboreta, etc. Thinking about those different uses and different zones and how people might then use those or be able to access them better. But lastly, to think about establishing demonstration sites for a variety of activities and users, but gathering data and understanding how they're using it, evaluate that and value the benefits from it. And to use consultancy like ours really to help you, because we have a wealth of knowledge in this area. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Alison. Super interesting. We've had loads of comments, loads of questions are coming in. I've got literally about 5 minutes for the Q&A, unfortunately, because everything has been so interesting already today. So I'm just literally going to jump straight into that so I can get some answers from you guys. Ian, there were some really just specific ones for you that I think you're going to be able to just answer straight away. First one being about why the panels on the ceiling and not the walls, but I think you kind of already talked about that in terms of the convection from the ceiling and the way that the air moves. Is that right? Oh, you're on mute.
Minimize convection and effectively just to get the uniform spread of the energy across the entire workspace. In some building formats, we are actually combining ceiling with walls. But it's just effectively, again, that kind of 3D approach to every building and being agnostic to the building type, coming up with the right bespoke solutions, which kind of matches the human interface with the actual efficiency of having it in the building and that route forward.
Great. Alison, we've got a question. Oh, yeah, my God, you're answering it. Wanted you to answer this verbally because it's a great one. It's a really important one. It's from Helen. Helen is a great supporter of sustainability partnerships, and she's always showing up for us and asking great questions. So she wants to know how NHS locations are funding the enhancement of outdoor spaces, because that's what we need to know. You know, that's what David needs to know. That's how everyone here needs to know. Where's the cash coming from? How did Lothian do it, and how are other people you're working with? How did they get the money to be able to justify working with you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in Lothian they were quite unique. They'd done a lot of work already on the nature side of things, and they were working with a local green network. I think the funding did come from the NHS, but I don't think it was funded outside of that. The other work with on a broader scale was actually part funded by Nature Scot, which obviously is interested in biodiversity conservation. So that was their input. And then Public Health Scotland put in some money as well. And other than that, other projects that I've heard about are more through charity funding and things like that. But I think what they were trying to do in Scotland was trying to get this part of the NHS budget for people to see that it was cost saving, so that it was worth the investment in the first place.
Yeah.
But money's
your trust, David, works a lot with Northumbrian Wildlife, right? So
we
a
do.
charity that supports.
And also the trust has its own charity, so some of the funding came through that. But yeah, we've put in a biodiversity pond, and we're greening some of the kind of concreted spaces and things like that. But again, funding isn't coming through the kind of central source. It's all these fringe things like charities and applications and sponsorships and partnerships with other kind of people that are working in that space.
Maybe we should run a session specifically on alternate ways of funding, and have people like yourself on, David, and maybe from other trusts as well, to just talk to each other about innovative ways that you've worked with other initiatives locally, and give some inspiration to other trusts that way. That might be helpful. Anyone who thinks that would be helpful, you can always email us at Sustainability Partnerships. You can always get in touch with us on our Twitter. You can ask us questions. You can get involved on the chat here as well. So anyone who's interested in that concept, please let me know. We'll try and put something together. One of the other questions for you, Ian, really quickly, is about you say the heat system heats objects in the room. But does it affect medical equipment? So I don't know if you've seen this question, if you had an answer.
No, I saw it already. I mean, I can answer that in more detail offline, but effectively, yes, it would have a marginal effect. But where you've got items in the way they've been listed here with very small surface area, it would be a very marginal effect. And most computers effectively, again, have a very small surface area that would be exposed to the infrared. There was another question, I think it was actually in the chat line, about damp or mold.
Yes.
And yeah, just to quickly,
sorry, that's gone past me in the chat.
Yeah, so just very quickly to cover that. The system is being used extensively by Welsh Government and Scottish Government to target damp and mold within the housing community. There's a new legislation coming through called Arab's Law, which effectively forces social housing and the rented sector to deal with damp and mold within a time frame. I've got a couple of, I'm just going to very, very quickly share the screen. I'll drop back into this very quickly, but just to give you an image, if I can get it to come up. Is that actually shared or not? Can you see that on the screen?
Yeah.
So I personally took those pictures in a tenement block in Scotland. People were living in this property 5 days before we went in to put NextGen in. I mean, it was absolutely horrific. But the interesting point here from your perspective in terms of some of the challenges you have with your buildings, the moisture contents were measured here by an independent party at 35% moisture content in the walls and 28% in the floors. Within 5 days, NextGen, just as a standard system, just on in the rooms at 23 degrees, managed to reduce the moisture content in the walls and the floor by effectively the best part of 30% in 5 days. So in fact, we're on the BBC One show, I think it's next week, in a feature by the BBC One show specifically around damp and mold. But that just gives you a perspective on how the energy effectively can heat the fabric of the building to a higher temperature than the actual air temperature. And there's key benefits to that around damp and mold. And then this whole issue of heating people.
Well, that's exciting, Ian. I didn't realise we had a minor celebrity on the call today.
No,
Time
definitely not.
tuning in to the BBC programme?
I'm going to hide.
All right,
I'm trying to lower my profile, not increase my profile.
Well, you're only going to increase it coming on and speaking about what you have done today. There have been a lot of questions, a lot of interest in both talks. I'm only sorry that we have to cut it off now. I know that there has been a lot of email addresses put in here. There's been Alison, you've shared your email address. Ian, if you can just add your email address in here as well, if you're happy for people to contact you, because I know that people have further questions, further comments. David, you're happy for people to reach out to you to talk further about things like competition, funding, collaboration, all that kind of stuff as well. And maybe I'll have you back on a webinar where we talk specifically about collaboration, that kind of stuff, where we're not speaking specifically about a kind of topic to do with sustainability, but more to do with funding and collaboration and stuff like that. We always record our webinars. This will be going on our YouTube channel. It will also be going on our Sustainability Partnerships website. Once we have the recording done, we'll do a write-up. We'll have all the slides, all the resources, and everyone's contact details on there as well. And you will be emailed a link when that goes live, probably sometime next week. If anyone does have any further questions, like I said, please reach out to our panelists directly. They are happy to have anyone contact them. So really appreciate that. And so I will have to leave it there because I'm a couple of minutes over, and a lot of people are having to drop out now. So I want to say a massive thank you for David, a brand new addition to our Sustainability Partnerships family, and we hope that he's going to continue to engage. Again, a massive thank you to Ian to tell us all about the next gen heating system, and you have definitely caused a stir and asking a lot of questions within our community. So excited to see where that goes within the NHS. And to Alison, an amazing feat of work that you've done, a great case study there from Lothian, and again a lot of people asking questions around how what you've done and how you can support. So thank you so much to our panelists. You've really given us a lot of inspiration and insights today. And thank you, as always, to our Sustainability Partnerships community and for turning up and listening to us month after month. We do have our next events coming up soon. Our next event next month. We already have some really great speakers for that one, and it's about the reduction of plastic, reduce, reuse, recycle. Again, this is one that we run every single year. We've got Dan, he's going to be talking to us from a company called BioBin. And we also have Dr. Richard Hickson. He's going to be talking to us about the work that he's been doing with Dan, and also how he's looking to bring down the use of plastics within critical care. There will potentially be some other speakers on that one, but that one's coming up on the 10th of October, so only in a few weeks. My team have put a link in there if anyone wants to sign up to that one right now, but we'll be sending out emails with more information on that. We also have the NHS Sustainability Awards coming up, which again we do every year. That will be in December. These are still open to all NHS trusts and to all businesses. We've got some business award categories and NHS trust award categories. They're free to enter. Please get involved. We love to showcase what's been going on within the sustainability side of healthcare in this country. So please do showcase everything that you've been doing. We'd love to hear all of the amazing stories and all of the good news stories to round out the year. So that's me. That is it. That is actually it for today. Thank you again so much to everyone for joining, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Georgia.
Thanks, guys.